Hello.
Hey, Mario.
Hi, Jake. How you doing?
How you doing, boss?
Okay, good. What are you up to? I know what you're up to. You're between dropping kids off and picking them up, and
I'm. Well, I just interviewed Raul Matute. Do you know him?
nope.
He was a keyboardist in Cold Blood.
Okay.
And
Great band.
and he was just talking about the hypnotic groove. I mean, the dude. I don't know. He's a pretty badass dude. He actually went into the airline industry for a while, but I mean, that band was fucking righteous. But yeah, I mean, let's hit, man. If you're ready, let's go.
Aren't they still together, Cold Blood? I mean,
Yeah, but there's no. Yeah, they are absolutely. Lydia's still doing it. I mean, I had a great interview with Lydia a couple months ago, but the band is, I mean, Rod Ellicott was on bass and Gaylord Birch was the drummer. Those cats are gone, But
yeah.
But Raul was the man, dude. Sick. He told the sick. He used to play with Bill Champlin and the guy Palmer, the Vibes player from the Suns, Jeff Palmer. But dude, and I've interviewed both those cats. But Champlin was playing bass.
Well, you know what? I think I met him at Jeff Palmer's place once. This guy you're talking about.
Yeah, Hispanic dude, like long black hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting dude. Anyway, he was talking about Garibaldi in the studio. So this leads into. Let's just start because this leads right into the theme of today.
Okay. What's the theme of today?
Well, you're gonna find out. Folks, welcome back. We are in the midst of going through the life of a legendary musician, Mario Cipollina, and we're biting this off little piece at a time. Mario, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, Jake. Good to be here.
I wanted to just read you this quote that I transcribed the other day, and then we can go farther because it's something that we really need to break down. This is from Gregorico, who I know you know.
Yeah.
He said, Sly Stone's brother, Freddie Stewart, we had a group for about a year called Freddie and the Stone Souls.
Wow.
Yeah. Sly had a radio show first on K-Soul. Then he went to KDIA. He was popular around the Bay Area.
Yep.
He used to produce for Tom Donahue.
That's right.
Tom Donahue was the godfather of FM, or otherwise known as AOR,
album-oriented radio.
Right. And I'm looking here. I had a typo. I put Alvin. That's going to go over great on Facebook. People love to make fun of my grammar. Album-oriented radio. He started KSAN. Before that, he worked with Bobby Mitchell, who was the program director for a big station in San Francisco called KYA. They were a network. They had affiliates across the country. When he picked one of your records, you could probably guarantee you had a hit. Anyway, why don't you just talk about the significance of, like, why was it so cosmic to be connected as a young teenager or younger with Tom Donahue and the Donahue family?
Do me a favor, jot down the name Bill Gavin also.
How do you spell the last name?
Gavin. That's someone we should discuss, and it is another heavy hitter in a similar sense.
But I get the feeling he was almost as great as your dad was as a craftsman and as a worker. I get the feeling Donahue was almost a surrogate father to you. But you riff.
Yeah, in a funny way, he was, as was Bob Browner, who ended up being our manager with the Muse. And I think that what he gave me that's a helpful gift from some people are lucky enough to get from their fathers is encouragement. Not necessarily in the traditional sense, but for example, when he asked me if I would fill in for Pete, it was Stoneground. That's a hell of an acknowledgement of what he thought of my capabilities, and so that was on par with a dad throwing a pizza party for their kid who did well in their baseball season or whatever.
Right on.
And it helped instill in me a sense of it helped me not to question myself so much, which by nature I tend to do to an extreme. And at that time in my life, had I been into a mode of a lot of self-questioning and maybe even self-doubt, like I go through these as an adult.
Well, I mean, yeah, we continually keep. It's amazing. I mean, it's a cycle. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, were those a more prevalent part of my nature at that point in my life? I don't think I would have done half of what I did or gotten to play with it, or even gotten to learn to play as well as I did with whatever limitations I have. It was still, like, example of my brother inviting me to come work with him. That was more than just, that was more than a job. That was certainly that was an adventure, but it was a confidence builder. Was it a validation of what of your craft, so to speak? I think so. It definitely let me feel. I felt like I was doing the right things. I felt like I had picked a good direction for myself.
Can you just talk about like the vibe of the Donahue house? I mean, was it just word of mouth that John was like, "Yo, my brother's been shedding a lot," or were you over there, playing music? I mean, and then give an idea of like how much pull he had.
Well, the place was. I think if you put another person in the house, it probably would have had a completely different feeling. But with Tom there, it definitely felt like how in Egyptian temples there's many levels that you walk through, and then finally there's the inner sanctum.
Yeah.
It was like walking into the inner sanctum of rock and roll.
Jeez.
Of that's what it felt. You felt like upstairs and around the corner through that door was where the real shit was going on. That was where things happened that made changes in the world. And he was that kind of guy. He was larger than life, and physically he was just a gigantic man. And his presence, I'm sure if you could take that spirit and put it in some guy, a little normal sized guy's body, it still would have been a huge presence. He just had this. There was a magical confidence and vision that you felt this guy had, and apparently he did.
What? So do you remember specifically how it?
The house?
Well, no, not so much the house, but how ultimately he decided. I mean, that was your first professional gig.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. You're right.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, initially he met me and had his kids, I guess, had told him that I was John Cipollina's little brother, and we went to school together. And so when we met at the house, saw him just about every day after school, and so I usually had an instrument with me. I was riding a motorcycle at that time, so fortunately I played a small bass. I played a Dan Electric Longhorn, which is very small and light, so I could take it with me on my bike. And so I had a little amp set up there, and I would play there, practice on my own. I would bring demo tapes and play them for his sons, who I was friends with at school. And so he expressed curiosity when he started hearing the demos. The first demo he heard of ours was the first demo we recorded at Mickey Hart's ranch.
Back there again, huh?
Yeah, back there again. Well, yeah, I mean, Mickey and his ranch played a big role in my early career.
Well, you talked before about the Quicksilver House and the Dead House, Cowboys and Indians. So you wound up often. Mickey, to his credit, he did offer that barn. He had a full studio.
That's right. Oh yeah.
So you were Stoneground, essentially Gibson and yourself, and who else? And so you guys were carving out a demo at Mickey's studio.
Yeah, that was with Soundhole.
Soundhole. Okay, this was Stoneground.
Right.
Yeah,
well, probably. I think I would have to say the first demo was probably under the name Wide Hole. Fortunately, that doesn't get printed a lot. People don't. Most of the guys that were in the band don't bring that up. I'm not that smart.
Wow. That's interesting.
So,
Donahue
well,
was Stoneground was an already established band, right? I mean,
yeah. Uh-huh.
So-
Well, actually, not hugely, because when I started playing with them was to support their first album. So
right. So
you know,
Sears went back to do the Gasoline Alley album,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
so he expressed interest in. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. You were rehearsing with them, and he heard you playing just demos of your own stuff.
he heard demos of my own stuff, and he heard me playing at the house. I would just not certainly. I've never been one to show off. I just at that point in my life, I just wanted to play all the time.
Right.
So I couldn't go hang out there for a few hours or a couple acid trips a week and
And do nothing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So although I did sell a lot of acid to some other of his Tom's friends, business people, that was pretty cool.
Wait, hold on. These were like.
I don't think I should drop the names though.
No. I'm just saying.
Published anyway.
But I mean, this was
Tommy
like,
Smothers was one of my main. Was someone who really liked the stuff that I had. I sold him a lot of acid.
I'm sorry, I missed the name. Who?
Tommy Smothers.
Tommy Smothers.
The Smothers brothers.
Tommy Smothers loved your acid.
Yeah.
So these cats. I mean, so he would just.
And what's the name? Artie Kornfeld, the guy who did Woodstock.
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how he heard it. He never heard him. I know he never saw me play live before he hired me. So I guess maybe it was just desperate, or he felt like well, it's only a couple of weeks, or I don't know why. I honestly can't say. I don't know why he took a chance and hired me. Honestly, and I never questioned it when he asked me to. It seemed perfectly logical, but in hindsight, it doesn't make any damn sense, really. Other than the guy who's like saw something that he felt confidence in, but certainly there was nothing that I had done around the house or had played for him that would give him the inclination that I was a safe bet on I'm sure. Now that you mention it, why did he do that?
Well, no, but here, don't worry about it. It's, probably you had a nice bottom end, and you could hold lock it down, and you weren't, like flying off. But I'm trying to figure this out. My impression is that he owned these radio stations, but he was also a manager of bands too.
Just that band.
Just that.
He was old friends of Sal Valentino's. I guess he had probably been a radio programmer when the Beau Brummels were big. Mm-hmm. And he and Sal were friends. Sal lived in San Francisco, and so I think his connection was more with Sal. And so when Sal wanted to start this band, Tom supported him, emotionally at least, because they were very close friends, and ended up becoming the band's manager, I guess, either by hook or by default, or wanted. I don't know that it was really something that he chose to do, or just kind of fell in his lap, or he felt that he was the right guy to do the job and help them. And
sure. So it was the only band that he managed, and you remember the feeling. Being that we're both sort of, we can get insecure, doubt ourselves, and sometimes, do you remember the feelings, the emotions you had? Were you petrified? Were you really hopped up and fired up? And then ultimately, what was that experience like? Did you, like, for instance, like with Stan Getz? Stan Getz was on the road with Tea Garden in 9th grade and basically became an alcoholic at that point and was a full-fledged heroin addict by 1948 with the Four Brothers. And I'm just trying to figure out if, you were obviously already playing with your brother and everything, but were you scared of the musician's life?
No. That was. I'll tell you. I never mentioned this to you, but I remember clearly in second grade, being, it was the same class where we had the same teacher that taught me how to write my letters and stuff. So I had the same teacher twice in elementary school, once in kindergarten and once in second grade. And in second grade, during one of the classes, it was in English. I remember we were doing English and C-spot run and all that kind of stuff. So we were practicing how to write C-spot run, and I got distracted with in my head, and I started. My dad had this amazing signature. He's old school Italian guy, and he told me, he used to say, Mario, in the world I come from, your signature is your seal.
Wow.
Is what he would say, and referring to when you used to close an envelope with something in the old days, they didn't close them with glue. They closed them with wax. You would take a candle and drip a drop of wax, so it would go over both the flap of the envelope and the body of the envelope, and then you would take a small brass stamp and set it into the hot wax and hold it there until it dried, and there would be a seal of your crest or your family symbol or whatever was your sign.
Wow.
And so later in his life, he adopted the attitude that your signature is now your seal. That's how you show that you are the person who authorized this and who authored this, whatever it might be. And in the old days, you wrote with a quill or a fountain pen. And so when you were a child raised in the early 1900s in Italy, you learned calligraphy. So, which can only be written with a broad tip fountain pen. So this is actually I'm actually on point. It doesn't sound like it, but so I remember my father, when I was very little, showed me his official signature, which looked like a piece of artwork. It was just unbelievable. There were clouds around it, and it was just I kind of give anything to have an example of his signature. I don't have one, but so to me, the autograph and the signature were basically one and the same. And so I decided during this class, as my mind wandered away from what I was supposed to see Tom and Dick run and whatever,
yeah, right.
I started working on my autograph, and I have the piece of paper actually somewhere. I've seen it recently. I have the piece of paper that starts off with C spot run, la la la, a few sentences of that, and then you see me. I start trying autographs or signatures, whatever you want to call it. And by the bottom of that page, I actually came up with the autograph that I use to this day. And that was in the second grade. The reason I brought that up is that I never questioned what I was going to do when I grew up. From the time I started playing bass, I knew that's what I was going to do. I knew that was my life. And I also never questioned that I would be successful at it. I knew I would be successful at it. It was never anything that I didn't put a drop of energy into being afraid I might not be successful at it. And that attitude stayed with me until, I didn't think I really ran into some self-doubt until in my 30s. But up until that point, it was something I never questioned. So when I was offered that job, deep inside, it made perfect sense. And I don't mean to sound egotistical. I just never had questioned where I was going.
No, I dig, man. This is great. Keep going, man.
It's just funny, and so I already had the autograph. I was ready to go.
No, you know what it is. I mean, it's so. I mean, aside from Healy barking at you in the garage and trying, I mean, was there times that you can point to where, older musicians were trying to get in your head and it never fazed you? Do you have any recollection of people trying to push you?
If I had any of those moments, they were more. I had a hard time with the kind of jock mentality of there are some musicians that even though they're musicians, their mentality is seems to be out of more of the sports world, the kind of towel slapping in the locker room kind of thing, vibe.
Yeah, the hazing and the fraternity.
Yeah, I never did well with people like that.
Do you remember? Go ahead.
There were a couple of them in the news, that just that attitude. I didn't have a lot of toughness for that kind of thing. No, so if I ever was under fire, either from the conductor of the orchestra or whomever, I would it would hurt a lot. It hurt more than I think most people or a lot of people. I didn't have much tensile strength for a certain kind of humor, a certain kind of club membership, camaraderie, and that doesn't sound right.
No. But this is important.
That whole towel
slapping. Can you explain when you saw that stuff or heard it? Why did it feel so? What's the right word?
I'll tell you why. Why it hurt? Because I had been bullied. When I was really young, I had a butch haircut. I wore glasses and a patch, and I had really buck teeth. So I took some heat.
Yeah, no, and they didn't have braces back then, right? I mean, you weren't.
Right.
Yeah, see, at least my teeth were fucked up too. I had braces though in 87, 80, you know. So you were bullied. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and so you know, I had the depression issue already early as a young child. So if I would get my feelings hurt, I didn't snap back real well. My feelings would stay hurt, and I would. I might have hidden it, but emotionally, I was cowering for pretty much any time I would run into the person that I had that kind of an issue with. You know,
Yeah, but I mean, once you got to the point where you were like clearly in your own realm, like you felt confident, you knew what you had a direction, like. What was it about that sort of club exclusivity, sort of, you know, hazing fraternity shit that just didn't mesh with you? Because what kind of personality, what kind of individualism is Mario Cipollina about?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but
well, what I'm saying is, it's like you know, if you don't go along with this kind of thing, then you're out of the club.
Oh yeah,
and that's just fine with me. I don't want to be in the fucking club.
Well, you can't be in that club if you're an empathetic person, because you can't be that way. You can't treat people that way if you consider how it feels to them. That's what I didn't like about that mentality, is that to have that mentality, the people that haze and tease and bully are not taking into account how that would feel. You can't be both. You can't be an empathetic person and emotionally abuse another person. And so all it would take for me was an example that someone had that quality to some degree in their personality, and I'd become very wary of them, and you know, many more times than not, there would be some kind of an engagement that would cause me pain that I had to hide.
Did you? So, I'm looking here at one of the notes, like I mean, you know, like language barrier with Van Morrison. Van was notoriously known for being completely erratic, unpredictable. Could have been a total asshole. Ozzy Allers told me he fired a guitarist on stage during a live gig.
Oh, sure.
Can you talk about the relationship with some of these Titanic people that you were very young and working with, and how you dealt with this, if the bullying came across, and how you ultimately internalized it and helped and dealt with it?
Well, let's see. You know, Van, there was never anything. I never felt like I was singled out with him, because we were a band that got hired by Van. So I was with my band. He was this other entity. You know, so when he spoke, if he had an issue with us, it was with us. I don't recall him singling out people that much, or maybe I don't recall it because he never singled me out.
No, can you give an example of how he would call the band out collectively? This is
okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. We were, like, for example, one time we were at rehearsal, and this was a semantic or a pronunciation issue we had, because he had a very strong Irish accent,
right.
And sometimes it was hard to understand what he was saying. So, like, one time we're at rehearsal, and we stopped the song. He says, "We've got to do it again. You're playing too light." And we thought he was saying, "You're playing it too light."
Right.
And so we would play this song and that passage we would play it much quieter, and then he'd say, he'd stop the band and say, "It's too light. Do it again." And we'd do it again, softer, even more softer. And he said, and then now he's yelling in the microphone while we're playing, "Too light, too light, too light." And we don't know. And so finally,
You're playing it. It's not. You're like it's silent.
His manager, who's a friend of ours, his tour manager guy, says, "Oh no, he's saying it's too loud."
Oh my god!
No, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I had it backwards. When he was saying too light, so we play it louder. That's what it was. He was saying it's too light. We thought he was saying too light, and we would play it louder. And so now he wants it quieter, but we're playing it louder every time. And then finally, it turns out that lied. He was saying light. Loud.
Loud. Well, that is
too light. It's too light. Yeah, that's
too loud. So so you thought he was saying too light, so you were playing it louder, but he was actually saying loud and
correct.
So how did
that was funny eventually, but not at first. It was pretty scary at first because we obviously were not pleasing him, and that was early on in rehearsal. So we definitely wanted to be pleasing him because that was a cool gig. I mean, career-wise, we knew it was a good thing for us. So
going back to Donahue, I mean, is it? Can you talk about his significance in helping cultivate the underground San Francisco sound that you were at the tail end of it? But I'm just trying to gain not just the Cipollina family, first gen Italian family, but without Donahue, you don't have any ability to project out all those bands, I don't
know exactly what you.
Well, I mean, like he single-handed. I mean, back before Clear Channel now controls 90% of the stations. I mean, you could. He had the ability to be able to take bands' music and really disseminate it through all the radio stations he had.
Yes, that's right.
So
I don't think I realized how powerful he was. I knew he was a heavy hitter. I don't think I think I thought of him more as a regional. I just didn't. Wasn't aware of the whole world really at that point in my life. I was just not experienced enough and hadn't been around enough blocks. But and now that you mention it, I never even thought about the fact that Tom Donahue and Van Morrison were close friends.
Really?
And undoubtedly, Tom had something to do with us getting the gig playing with Van.
So he really was fond. He obviously not only thought you were a very good player, but he liked you too. I mean, I
think so.
Yeah, that's what an interesting.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. But this again, we one of the cool. We can check off the Shalleck murders. We covered that on my radio show. We can go into that in deeper detail. But one thing you've dealt with early on between the bullying. Sort of the unpredictability of your father, having these natural musical gifts, having your consciousness expanded almost every day at a very early age. I mean, you did deal with a lot of tragedy, and can you talk about this high school sweetheart you had and how everything went down with that?
Yeah, Karen was she was such an angel. She was just an angel, and she was so sweet. And she, like me, she was someone that was very likable and had a lot of friends on the surface, and people did, but also it had her limits as far as how far she would let people into her life. And,
sure.
And she and I felt safe with each other, and she would come with me a lot. Actually, she was quite a fixture up at Donahue's with me. She was my sweetheart, and when I was up there, a lot of times she was there too. And Tom admired her artwork very much. Tom was a collector of Mucha prints. He had an amazing collection of Mucha artwork.
Wow.
And the whole house was full of it. And Karen was a gifted artist, no doubt. The thing is that she, at that point in her life, was only drawing and painting screaming faces with hands over them. And you're talking about a drop-dead, beautiful young girl who had the sweetest smile and most beautiful, engaging eyes, and a wonderful smile, and seemingly very happy. I was always troubled by her artwork because I never saw any any example of that kind of emotion in her. You couldn't imagine where it was coming from.
Right. It's an interesting disconnect where she wasn't necessarily channeling it through her own being, but through her art, she was.
I couldn't know. We took a lot of acid together and stuff too. She took a lot of LSD also. But what I didn't know.
Can you talk about it, like a trip you remember you guys taking together? Not a vacation. I mean, like an acid trip, or where you know.
Yeah, right. Well, no, we were 15, so we weren't taking a lot of trips. But she was not that guy. But she was with me one night. We took acid up there. It was a Friday night, and we took acid kind of later than usually. We normally would have dropped earlier, but I don't think we dropped until maybe 10 or 12 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And So when sunrise came, I was still peaking, but so we had spent that whole night sitting. She and Sean and I talking, and she was drawing, and I can't, it's hard to describe a.
Sean is Donahue's son.
Yeah, Sean is Tom's son. Yeah,
okay.
And so anyway, that was just one morning. I remember I wanted to go for a ride and see the sunrise, and she didn't want to come with me. So she stayed at home, and I took off. Now, Tom Donahue's house was down a driveway that you couldn't really call it a driveway. It was a steep, windy path with two strips just the width of a tire. And you had to stay on that patch of concrete and wind down this super steep hill. I mean, really unbelievably steep. And then that you would come to the house. Well, so on a motorcycle, that was a hell of a challenge. On acid, big challenge. And so to take off peaking on acid, I'll never forget how scary that was, getting up that driveway and out into the road. But anyway, on the ride, I got stung. I saw a wasp. I could see, it had, 2010 vision on acid. I could see this thing. I could see this thing about a quarter mile down the road, and I'm aware that if I'm not lucky, it's going to hit. I'm going to hit it, And so, sure enough, right up under my face mask, and it got me on the lower lip and stung me and stayed there. So I come to a sliding stop, kickstand down, motor off, all at the same time, and I get this wasp off. So by the time I get back to Donahue's house, now I've got this lip the size of a grapefruit, and I have to negotiate the driveway back down, get the whole thing. And Karen nursed me back to calmness with popsicles. She just kept handing me,
I love that. No, wait, you had exited Donahue's house, and you were back. You were watching the sunset, and you got stung while you were watching the sunset.
Sunrise. I was out watching the sunrise.
You were out watching. That's when you got stung.
Yeah, coming back home from the hill I had driven up to go watch the sun come up. And I'm coming blasting down this hill about 50 miles an hour and saw this wasp. And somehow I knew that he and I were going to, it was one of those things, I saw him a quarter mile out, and I knew he was going to be a problem.
Ultimately, did you see her beginning to fade away at some point? Were you,
no.
Okay, so what?
I don't know. That's one of the few things in my life that I don't feel like I have any answer to. Much, it made no sense. What I did find out, although pardon me, after she died, I found out that she had been seeing a psychiatrist for a number of years, actually, and was schizophrenic. I didn't know. The Karen I knew didn't have that in her, but the Karen that drew those drawings was the troublemaker, and that was someone I never met. I never met that person in her, and that's then. So there's one, and within 3 years, I had a run with another schizophrenic who killed my best friend and his parents. It was the brother of our drummer. The guy who killed Dan Shalik and his parents was our drummer's brother. So that's twice before I'm 19 years old that I've had a very close and meaningful and life-changing encounter with psychiatric problems.
So just the chronology is that when did you first go on the road with Stone Ground? You were 14?
15. 15. Yeah, I was a sophomore.
You were a sophomore, and then your sweetheart.
She died the next year. So when I was 16, she hung herself.
How did you discover her?
No, fortunately not. Her little brother did. It was before school. She hung herself. They found her when her brother went to wake her up for school.
Being that, could you have any memory of considering it maybe was somebody you might have wound up spending the rest of your life with?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, how did you? I mean,
absolutely.
Aside from the shock and the grief and the normal stuff, I mean, do you obviously you're never going to get an answer or understand why, but do you remember how you held it together?
I didn't. I still think about her every day. It's just one of those things. You don't get over it. It just becomes part of who you are.
Right.
And and that's no reflection on my wife. It's so funny. I'm as I've gotten as I've matured or whatever, as I've gotten older. Let's just face it, getting old. As I've started getting old, I'm a little more at peace. And part of it is that Kendra is so cool. My wife is so non-judgmental and there's not a jealous bone in our relationship. And
sure, no, I mean these are like situations where there's this intersection of spirituality where obviously you meet somebody who like where you go with her now and support while she goes out to her work gigs and you want to go and hang out with her but then there's this idea of like a soulmate. And I remember when I interviewed David Crosby, I got a whole 25 minutes from Cros, and one thing I did ask him about was, I'm trying to remember back. I know Freiberg was on. I don't think I remember your brother on it, but there was this seminal album that David did called "If I Could Only Remember My Name."
Yeah, I auditioned for that gig.
So it was with the peer group a little bit ahead of you, I guess, with like Cassidy and Lesh and Yorma and those cats. And but the thing is that I'm not sure if you know the backstory there, but he similar to you, he had this woman. This was a woman that he was going to marry, and I forget her name now, but she was involved in a car accident. She was killed, and David, at that time, it's like 71, 72, and he was in the only place that he felt any solace at all was in Wally Heider's studios. And what was amazing about chronicling that was that he talked about Grace Slick and Jerry and basically almost coming every night to support him there. And it turned into a whole bunch of peeps coming, Graham Nash and Freiberg, and that album though that's a memorial to this girl that is long gone, but was his soulmate. So you consider this this girl your soulmate, and it's and that is. I mean, it's actually nice that a girl would even be attracted to you. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. Well, you're like a bucktooth acid eating freak. But
right.
I mean, listen. I guess what I'm getting at is that you struggle in your own head, as I do, and yet what I'm trying to get at here is the crux of how does Mario Cipollina still stay together, overcoming adversity. Could be the Shallicks, could be the sweetheart, it could be misinterpreting Van's language. I'm being facetious. Whatever.
I think a lot of it is that I've always been really empathetic. I've always been really in tune with the feelings of others around me,
right.
Whether they're close people or not. I'm just to a fault, really. It's it's I wish I could back it down somewhat, just because it's a lot to feelings. Sometimes I'm uncomfortable just driving through San Francisco because it's hard to deal with all the psychic energy. I think that's why I like being up at night, because most people are asleep, and the airwaves get quieter. In the daytime, when everyone's up and struggling and doing what they're doing and hoping and dreaming and suffering, and I feel all that. I think everyone does, but I'm just more kind of consciously aware of it. I think it's harder. It's quieter at night in my head, and I think it's because it's psychically just a quieter environment.
I completely. I know. I mean, I'm pretty much dead to the world by like. I shut myself down. I'm not a night owl, but there is something.
You know what happens?
No, I mean I can feel that sonic nature. Just it comes down.
Yeah.
And as opposed to that buzz.
Right. Exactly.
That's happening during. That's happening.
It starts going away by 7 o'clock at night. It's much calmer.
Do you feel like, looking back on your teen years and into your early adulthood years, that not that you would change it, but that you experienced too much too fast? Or, I mean, I'm not saying that you were sheltered, but
no.
There's many cats that, like I was relatively inexperienced in almost every facet of my life before I went to Boston University in college.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Did you even go to college?
No.
No. So, I mean, before you were college age, you had already pretty much packed a couple of lifetimes into your life.
It never even came up going to college. It never came up. It never came up with my parents. It never came up with me. I had a path, and it was clear, and never came up.
Did you, even though you were less self-conscious, didn't have a lot of self-doubt, can you say that, was there anything definitively, were there points of your early life that you feel were traumatic for you?
Traumatic? Yeah, sure, yeah. We've talked about a few of them. But my mom and dad had a fight one time that they split up for a couple of days, and that was traumatic. There was there were a number of times when I had little mini breakdowns, depression breakdowns that I pretty much kept to myself. Although those are the ones I told you my sister would always seem to find me, my brother's twin, Mike.
Of course, you had this simpatico with her, this telepathy.
I guess, yeah, we did, and so those are traumatic memories for me. Just those, feeling like I had the weight of the world on me for some reason, not understanding what it was, why I was so upset. It was kind of scary.
But here's the thing, Mario. Here's the thing, is that you didn't get stuck in it in a long period of time. Yeah. So I'm just trying to get at the idea of your psychology. If you can try to explain
how do I gain altitude from those things?
Yeah, I mean that to me it's like, dude, you were on pins and eggshells around your father. You have this musical genius gift. You're in the middle of a bastion of whatever, I hate the word counterculture, but it's all there, and yet you're experiencing trauma in your own psyche, and yet you're not slitting your wrists, you're not hanging yourself like your high school sweetheart did. You're still alive today.
That's the empathetic thing. That's the thing which kept me alive even recently, is that there's always been someone in my life that I loved enough that I couldn't do it to him, and that I couldn't stay down for, that I had to get back to not upset someone else's egg cart. And you know what I mean? It was like, it was like when Dan got killed, I couldn't fall apart because we needed a band leader, or our band was going to fall apart, so there was always somebody that I felt was more important than what I might have wanted to run away, or emotionally, or whatever way, and there was always someone that I cared about enough that that I was able to fight my way back for them. Never for me, but that's cool. Whatever it took.
I mean, I really hope that is that really genuine. I'd like to believe you're a little more selfish than that. I mean, to me, it's like
no. I'm sorry to be honest with you. No, I'm not.
So this is why sometimes this is why you have these bouts where you're thinking about the guns because you are always doing it for other people, and if you can't find those people, then you get very depressed.
No, I think it's the other way around. I think it's when I get depressed, if I didn't have those people in my life, the guns would come out. Like I've lived a number of times now for my wife. Period. Not for my son, not for my grandchildren, but for my wife. I just couldn't do it to her, no matter how much I want out at the time and how much I can't see any way out. I just can't do it to her.
What's the closest
What the hell does that sound?
You all right?
I'm fine.
Right.
My phone's beeping at me for some reason. Anyway.
What's the closest you've come to pulling the trigger?
Oh, which time? I don't know.
I think what I'm getting at is that you've had the gun in your mouth.
Oh yeah. Yeah, a few times. Cocked, locked, loaded, ready to go. And but I think actually the closest time was when I got arrested with the gun under my seat when I was driving out of town at 100 miles an hour. I had this vision. The Golden Gate Bridge was pretty close. I was on the other side of the railing of the Golden Gate Bridge once, and that was just a fluke. I mean, I told you, my phone rang in my pocket. Of all things, I answered it with one hand. I'm hanging on the fucking railing, and I answered a phone call. It was funny. I mean, that's a funny story, actually, in hindsight. But that was after 6 months of obsessing on jumping off the bridge. I knew that's where my peace was, and I obsessed on it. I thought about around the clock. I was strung out. I couldn't seem to kick, and I certainly wasn't willing to live the way things were going. And after I'd been fired and stuff, and there were two suicide attempts. Borderline brushes were based on aftermath of being fired. That was pretty traumatic.
So just to wrap this, I want to be clear that you're driving out of town. This was after you had gotten fired.
Yeah, I had gotten fired,
from the news.
My wife left me
from the news.
Yeah, from the news. Yeah, and my wife left me while I was just still in treatment. I got fired while I was in treatment. Actually, I was in the hospital. The band came and fired me. But so I got out of the hospital, out of treatment. My wife had left, and I still was a single parent of half 50-50 time parenting my kids, and my first wife, who was my kid's mother, was afraid for my kids. I guess my son was telling her how depressed I was, and that he thought I was doing drugs, and he was telling her about it and stuff. So he left. He made a choice not to come back to me one day. I went to pick him up at school, and he wasn't there. And I came home and found a note he had written me before school and left for me. And I still have that letter. It's pretty tough, but so then the only kid after school I was picking up was my daughter, and then one day I went to pick her up and she wasn't there, and that was it. For me, that was because that was it, and that was the night I went to drive off, and take care of it, But the cops pulled me over.
So you were on your way to the Golden Gate Bridge driving 100 miles an hour.
No, I was on my way. I was actually driving. I had this place in mind. I was going to commit suicide in Fortuna, California, which is up near Eureka. And it was just I used to go there to visit my grandma when she was old. And for some reason, I just fixated on that because I wanted to do it someplace where my kids, I wasn't going to have any chance of in my mind, my kids would never have to see me like that. if I did it in the home or some, there was some, to me, there was some chance that the kids might be involved in finding me, and I wasn't willing to do that. So, my big tip of the hat to my children is I was going to do it away from home. So I was on my way to Fortuna with the gun. The bridge was another time separate.
So you were on your way to Fortuna, and the cops pulled you over.
Yeah,
those cats were saying, now is not the time to go, Mario.
I ran a stop sign.
We're going to give you a ticket.
Yeah, I ran a stop sign. Ticket, nothing. It was it hit the Associated Press. It was a nightmare.
Oh.
The next day, the next morning, the morning after the day that my daughter didn't show up for me to pick her up, there was a headline with a picture of me, and they made it sound like the writer made it sound like I had been chased down, like a dog, like they had been chasing me. It sounded like like some rap guy had a gunfight and was chased, and it was just made it this whole thing.
It was a shootout. Wait, but you had no drugs in the car or anything?
I had a ton of them. They found everything. Oh. Yeah, I had some of everything. I had heroin, speed, and coke, and a 44 loaded under my seat.
What was the year?
That would be 95, maybe 96, wow. Early 96. Wow. It was November. It was October. No, September 29th, 1985.
85?
Mm-hmm. A year after I was fired.
And your brother was still alive?
Yeah, my brother was alive. Wow. In fact, the last thing he said to me, after my first wife and I had broke up, I did the classic thing. I ended up living on a couch in my studio in Santa Fe, and he came to visit me there one evening. It was 4 or 5 days after I'd left my wife and kids and had to move out, and he came to visit me, and I said, he's leaving. We're waving goodbye out in the parking lot of my studio, and the car that someone had given him a ride, and the car stopped, and my brother sticks his head out, and I had told him the story of what happened before I left. My wife had actually tried to jump out of the car on the freeway, and then I realized that we had gotten so toxic to each other that someone had to leave, and she wasn't gonna, so I did. And I told him that story. So anyway, as he's driving away, the car lurches to a stop. My brother opens the door and sticks his head out, and he looks at me and says, "Hey, Mario." I said, "What?" He goes, "You should have let her jump." And then they drove away.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. Well, I got to tell you, this is what the